And as I said, it's something to talk about. Or do you have any something to say or something to ask? Anyone has any questions about his lecture? They are welcome to come over here and ask very briefly, but not a, don't give a lecture again on this lecture. Just ask a question. Kindly. One by one, please. That mic will come to you. Kindly.
Mr. Chatterjee, we enjoyed your talk very much, but I would request you to throw light on your English August novel and how it was made into a movie. And second thing, I understand you live in Sri Lanka, or you spent some time in Sri Lanka. I mean, why you decided to sort of live in Sri Lanka? First of all, I stand corrected if I am mistaken. But I would request you to throw more light on English August and how it was made into a movie. Thanks.
But I don't stay in Sri Lanka anymore. Okay. Okay, what question on English August is, the filmmaker phoned me out of the blue one day and said, I'd like to make a film. And that's the film. And then it took several years. It takes a very, very long time. It takes a very long time to make a film, getting funding and so on. So I think it took about 5 or 6 years before we could actually make it. We wrote the screenplay.
Namaskar sir, I am Dr. P.K. Tiwari and this is coincidence, I am from English literature. 40 years before, when I was in Ranchi University, my professor Dr. D.K. Chatterjee referred you while talking a theory of fiction in English literature. So it is very much inspiring. It is an intellectual upliftment to listen you, sir. This is a mesmerizing experience. But there is lacking India or Indianism in your works. Just English man everywhere. This I feel, sir. So, just whenever we read Rabindranath or anywhere, so absolute India is everywhere, sir. So that should be reflected. I expect, sir.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind when I write my next book. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Is in two parts. What you proposed, would you still call it English? Not English as we've studied it, the language of the Englishman? What would you call it?
I still call it English in India. I used this just as a, what's it called?
Stir up some thought.
Well, it's worth it, I think, because it will cover the usual ground, and instead of the boring texts that I mentioned, you read texts. In fact, the only thing that interests me, but if I spend half an hour thinking about it, it will probably get an answer. The thing that interests me is English fiction in India and English poetry are in very good shape. English drama in India is a bit wobbly,
But English writers from India, are they considered English writers or Indian writers?
That depends on whoever is writing the newspaper or magazine article. I don't care.
Hello, sir.
I would like to ask you, I as a child read a number of books in translation of Chatterjee, and I could read a streak of feminism in his novels, which no one has marveled so far. So, what is your take on Chatterjee's literature, if I may ask you?
I confess, once I started reading in Bengali and in Hindi, I don't read books in those languages in translation. And I haven't got down to Sharat Chandra yet. It will take me, I hope to. So I can't actually answer this. But, I mean, it's obvious that, one can't read in all the Indian languages. I enjoy it very much. Just as an example, I think I've answered your question in the sense that I'm not going to read Sharat Chandra in English, and I will get down to Sharat Chandra in the future. But, for example, I don't think I'll ever read Malayalam in the original. But I wanted to when I was reading Legend of Khasak. I said, I read this English version. I said, the original must just be so much better. But there it is. It's nice when you have no chance of reading the original text. It's nice to read a translation. Having said that, I should add that no matter how good the translation, it will never be. It will never be. Which is why I think it's so unfair when it's part of the colonial experience. This, English is at the apex, at the summit of the pyramid of languages. But that's because we are ex-colonials. I remember I saw Hamlet, the text, in French. It's nothing. I read it, and sometimes it is nothing. There's nothing in it. It's just another play. So ditto, when you think of more than War and Peace, there's this long story by Tolstoy called The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which mind expanding. And of course I read it in English, and I said, I'll never be able to read this in Russian, but so what, at least I managed to read it in some form or the other. So Sharat Chandra, it's pity, I'll get down to it. Yeah.
I am an English professor retired, taught in university. As an English teacher, I'm concerned whenever I hear that Indian English needs to be taught. I feel that I think I won't be wrong if I say you and I learn to write English in an Indian way because we learn English in all its basic qualities and characters. So, as school teachers, for example, how do you tell them, teach students Indian English as it figures in our Indian writing in English? Language is actually an evolving thing and it can be personalized by your writing. So even now there's a new word, Ukraine. So I'm just wondering whether this will be a practical approach, because learning English has now become a must for students to survive in this globalized world, in this digitalized world. So how do you look at it, not only as a writer, but from the point of view of teaching English as part of curriculum and to the students?
I didn't make myself clear. I just presume that there will be teachers who will teach them their Red and Martin. I mean, you cannot begin with Indian English from day one. And in fact, now that you've said this, I mean, the quality of English writing journalism is so poor. Because why? It's not the fault of Indian English. It's because no one is teaching them Red and Martin. Not only that, when we read Red and Martin in school, it had everything in it. No, I mean, sorry, because our daughters, I saw their Red and Martin, they've just removed huge chunks of it. It's been reprinted, removed this, removed that. So I said, where are the gerunds? Where is the rest of it? Ours was this kind of fat tone. So you have, obviously, if you are studying Indian English, by which I mean not grammatically incorrect English, what What I mean is Indian English, English as it is used in India. So, but it will obviously mean, and in fact, I didn't spell it out because I said this would get too boring. I mean, you take a newspaper. Sorry to be parochial, the only newspaper that used to write correct English was the Statesman. And to some extent the Hindu. The rest of them, my God, in fact, in any class you should take a newspaper and say, okay, here, read this paragraph and tell me how many grammatical mistakes you will find. That's the kind of, you need to teach them. I mean, we all have met entrance to use their language. So, Indian English is as English exists, evolves in our country. The quality of English in the computer stuff that people read, I mean, it's so poor, but no one seems to care. Oh, because we don't have the time. All that needs to be taught, but it has to be taught which is true for all languages. It's not as though, my Hindi teachers were good, but then my Hindi was poor too in school, so we didn't care. It's something you just force yourself to learn.
Hello sir, it's a wonderful session. I want to ask that most of the times, as you also said, that we cannot read any other languages which we are not comfortable with, like other regional languages. So we usually go for the translation. So what would you say about, as a writer or as a reader also, that how authentic it would be, or is it there that sometimes translation is better than the original, or original is better than the translation? What's your take on this?
Well, I can't think of a translation better than the original. Like, I still remember reading one English translation of Dostoevsky, and the reviewer, complete idiot, asked me, oh, this is better than, I think it was Crime and Punishment, this is better than, it can never be. You might find perfect, you might go the language, it's true that the language into which you translate had better be better than your knowledge of the original, because you need that facility in the translated language, in the language into which you are translating. But those nuances, you need to know in all the languages. So it's not as though you, as I said earlier, it's better than, better having a translation than none at all. But now that you set me off, I didn't mention it because I found Anandamart, which is the first Bengali, which is I read after. I found it shocking in its right-wing nationalism. I said, oh my God, how can? But at least it was direct. But the first translation of Anandamart that I read, there's one by an American called Julius Littner, which is very good, which is a lesson in love. He's really worked at it. But there's one by some Bengali teacher in some university in America where he's removed all the references to Muslims and put in the British. And there's no one there to correct him, to say that that's not there in the original. Because at the end of it, Bankim Chandra is vaguely sort of quoted it Trivedi. That's maybe because he was the deputy corrector, sorry. But there it is. It's what it's. But these things you'll never, unless you know both the languages, you'll never get to know. But that kind of thing can be dangerous too. But still, if you can read in as many languages as you can. Which is, I'm simplifying matters because, I find, as I said, I read some French, so I find my luck. I read a French translation, very boring, of Proust. I read the original. As we say in Hindi, the language is so difficult. Even the dictionary. So you need to know your limits as well. That's why Jivanananda I was very proud of having read and having understood the original words. Great fun.
One last question. Since we are talking translations, if you, an English writer, if you're given the choice, which is the first language you would want your writings to be translated into? A European language, an Indian language?
There have been a couple of translations into European languages. No, here I tried myself, inspired by my success in reading Bengali. I tried to translate English August into Bengali. I gave up at 9:45. I just couldn't. It's very tough. As I said, you need to know the language into which you are translating much better than the original. It's not easy. It's very tough. Sorry.
You would want them to be first translated into other Indian languages? Or
Yeah, because that world is familiar, isn't it? I mean, in the sense that, for example, English August is not a clean book. It's full of obscenities. The French translation, which is quite popular, has vulgarized it. It is all dirty stuff. Has been removed. They found dirty enough, but cleaner French phrasings for the original. So, well, better than nothing. But people who read the English say, oh my God, this is not the correct translation, etc. That's a universal story. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful lecture and also a live and vibrant question answer session. We hope you will always accept our academy's invitations and please come, because he always stays in abroad these days. Last year also he came from Sri Lanka, this time from Brazil. Thank you so much. Thank you all of you and good night, Shubharatri, and tomorrow we will meet here again in our regular sessions.